Hello, everyone, and a very good morning to our esteemed panel of communication specialists, and also to our audience who has taken time off today to join us in this episode of our very special SEA webinar series. My name is Kelvin, and I lead business development here in Icentia. And I'm most privileged to be in the company of top leaders today to discuss something that is close to all our hearts in the PR and communication space. From the past two episodes, we have first discussed how we leverage upon AI-driven audience intelligence to gain deeper insights and unparalleled insights as well. Subsequently, our next episode focused on how we can crack the reputation code and using reputation intelligence to build a stronger brand. Today, in the last of our webinar series, we are talking about what other tools do PR professionals have in their arsenal to help them tailor and enhance their efforts in public relations and communications. It is not only important to be an astute storyteller to inform your audience about your brand and positioning, but what else can we leverage upon to maximize your PR impact? And how do you actually choose the most relevant media to share your stories? Well, today you're in for a treat. We are talking about media archetypes and how they can help you shape your thinking about communicating to your audiences using the various forms of media, and how do you actually influence their perceptions and also manage their expectations along the way. So let me first start off by introducing our product specialists and panelists with you today. Faris, who is our Insights Manager, will take us through the methodologies and concepts behind media archetypes. Separately, for our panelists, we are most privileged to have these experts with us today. Today, we have Mr. Raziz Rashid, strategic communications expert and former head of corporate communications to the Prime Minister's Department of Malaysia. And of course, we have Mr. Puneet Pal Singh as well, Director of Communications from Asia Pacific Cisco. And a very, very warm welcome to all our guests with us today. And now, to give you an overview of what media archetypes are, I will hand this over to you, Faris. Over to you, Faris.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm here sharing media archetypes as a product. So our product, Media Archetypes, aims to help PR professionals and brands to choose their media outlet wisely in promoting their messaging in campaigns and narratives. This is so that they are able to refract their narratives through a prism of messages to captivate their intended audience. So in a sense, PR professionals now have the power to tailor their messaging to perfectly align with the values, tones, and audience of each media outlet. In doing so, we are employing Carl Jung's theory of archetypes. So he posits there are 12 universal patterns of behaviors and personalities that exist within the human psyche. Each archetype is associated with specific characters and behaviors, and individuals may resonate with one or multiple archetypes. Take, for example, a ruler archetype. Now, a ruler archetype is someone who exudes power, status, success, wealth, and royalty. A hero archetype, for example, is someone who is brave, courageous, and honorable. As such, we archetypes to the media industry, which reflects and adapts to the archetypes of its audience. So hypothetically, Forbes reflects a ruler archetype. Vice would be considered as a rebel, and Nat Geo as freedom. So we are doing so not just from a media outlet perspective, but or rather, in other words, how does the media project itself, but also from an audience reception as well, of how the audience perceive the media outlets and its corresponding archetypes. We then transpose the idea of archetype to the characteristics of the media industry. So for example, Sage refers to an unbiased reporting which attract audiences seeking trusted news sources. Jester are news outlets with provocative headlines which attract audiences who are interested in these topics. So let's put things into perspective. And let's say you are managing one of these three brands. There's Disney Family Sing-Along, Under Armour, as well as Audi. Let's just take Under Armour, for example. Their key narrative is to promote its new line of athletic wear that is designed for high-performance activities. And their target audience are men who are engaging in high-performance activities such as running and CrossFit. Hence, the media archetype suited for them is a hero archetype, which reflects achievement and risks. And one of the media outlets with that archetype that they may approach to promote their brand and, for example, to promote their campaign is Men's Health. So the question is, how do we do so? So the methodology is that first we sample the contents of the media outlets and what are people talking about them. We then code and classify both the news output as well as social conversations. Lastly, we analyze and look into the data and trends to identify any gaps or alignments. For example, we did a short pilot study of media archetypes in Singapore and how audience perceive them. We use 3 online media brands in Singapore: Chinese Asia, Mothership, and Rice Media. And we derive the content from online news. And for the audience perception portion, we use Facebook forums and Twitter. So very quickly, we can identify that CNA has a sage-like archetype as its dominant archetype. This is due to its informative and groundbreaking news. As for the secondary archetype, we realize that they have everyman archetype as they produce publications or news of everyday happenings. When it comes to audiences, audience also perceive them as a so they perceive CNA as a creator archetype for the documentaries and productions that they produce. Next, for Mothership, is found to be an everyman archetype for the dominant archetype and Sage for the secondary archetype for both brand and perception. Last, Rice Media, on the other hand, has a jarring gap. Its main archetype is a magician, sage, and creator. However, the audience perceives them as an everyman or a rebel archetype. So, in summary, here's the 3 media outlets and its corresponding archetypes based on their media outlets intent as well as their audience reception. So on top of Carl Jung's archetype, we also employ Jennifer Ecker's brand personality in examining these media outlets. So brand personalities are a set of human characteristics that are attributed to a brand. It helps consumers to connect emotionally with a brand and creating some sense of familiarity and trust. Similar to archetypes, we also employ a syntax-based personality index tagged to each persona. For example, there are 5 personas over here: sincerity, excitement, sophistication, ruggedness, and competence. Let's take, for example, sincerity. It is attributed to ground reporting, giving voice to the marginalized and everyman, and it focuses on human interest stories. For excitement, on the other hand, refers to creative ways of news reporting and storytelling. So for the results, we got that CNA scored the highest when it comes to competency for both its brand intent and perception. Mothership scored highest for its sincerity. Rice Media scores were mixed, but scoring higher towards the ruggedness and sincerity overall. So here's the overall results from the archetypes as well as brand personality. So CNA is considered as a credible and trustworthy. So brands engaging CNA would know that the news platform is one of the most credible news outlets and that consumers highly trust the site. For Mothership, it is community-oriented as it positions itself as a news platform for the layman. While they still report on serious news and they are still credible, audience generally expect news which are more community-related. And last, Rice Media, it is giving some voice to obscure stories. So it is really insightful as it goes down to the ground and give voice to unknown. So based on these 3 results, brands will then know how or where they should pitch their narratives or pitch their campaign to each media outlet. So that's all from me. And if you're interested to learn and want to know more, feel free to drop us an email and to contact us. Right. Thank you, and back to you, Kelvin.
Thank you very much, Faris. I think it has been most interesting and thought-provoking to give us and our audience another lens on how a brand's intent and the objectives are versus the audience perceptions. And I'm sure, all fellow PR colleagues and specialists in this call would value and understand this because they probably have used this in some shape or another. Okay, perhaps they might be using different names and terminologies along the way. I think, but what Icentia and the media archetype team here in Icentia has done is really to do a proper research, getting the right and fair amount of data, make sure it's cleansed, it's clean, and putting them into the correct buckets. So in short, I think if I were to put it succinctly, it's really how a company is looking to position itself in comms, and how is it trying to understand and identify the underlying characteristics and typologies of the many different media outlets out there, and how the audiences actually view them. So in terms of these perception and how the brand wants to position itself, is there a mismatch or is there a fit? So how can one systematically identify these perceptions and choose the most relevant outlet, right, for your communication strategies? So really, it is being able to help a brand pull the right levers to maximize your impact in terms of communications. Sorry. So based on the informative sharing today here by Faris, I would now like to share the stage together with my panelists to hear some of their thoughts and views about this topic and more. So today, again, I would just like to introduce, we have Mr. Raziz Rashid from the Strategic Comms Expert and former Head of Corporate Comms to the Prime Minister's Department of Malaysia. And of course, we have Mr. Punit Pal Singh, Director of Communications, Asia Pacific Cisco. So perhaps let's start off first. First question in terms of a panelist discussion is directed to Mr. Raziz. Can you let us in on some of your key learnings when you use media archetypes to share and shape public perception and build trust along the way, while especially communicating government initiatives? Over to you, Mr. Raziz.
Hi, thank you, Kelvin. So a little bit background for me. My name is Raziz Rashid. I'm the former head of corporate comms for Prime Minister Department. Before this, I was in the government for almost 15 years, communicating initiatives, policies, and also activities from the government. So in my experience, there are certain, maybe we do not share the same terminology like just now mentioned by Faris regarding all the thing, but I can put it in a simpler way to understand. For example, when we have the vaccination programs and all that, we are trying to promote or using the archetype of caregiver, right? Where we approach media such as almost most social media platforms of that to give the idea of to as a caregiver type archetype to promote new vaccination program. And I spoke to the media how vaccine would protect children from serious illness, and also emphasize the government's commitment to keep our nation and people safe. This is to build trust in the government and the vaccination program. And also when I have the experience to promote the anti-corruption campaign, we have to find some sort of like an authoritative media, such as in Malaysia, we have Utusan Malaysia, we have Berita Harian, and all the mainstream medias. And also when we appear to be on RTM, TV3, this is official government's channel, we can most giving the most relatable ideas to the people regarding the message that we are going to send. There are some certain campaign that were involved before this. The previous government, we have the Keluarga Malaysia campaign. During the Keluarga Malaysia campaign, we try to maximize all channels, all media channels. That's the idea, to maximize all the eyeballs, all the media channels, regardless of the archetypes, right? So we find it a little bit difficult when we try to promote it in terms of rebellious platform, like you said just now, right? There's a rebellious platform and all that. So we have to choose our archetypes. Our database in the government, we have all the registered media outlets, media types, and all that in our database, but we do not have some sort of like a categorization or which this media belongs to and all that. We can only say that this belongs to the government media, official media and the prime media, and also online media. That's the basic categorization that we're doing. But when we try to find the persona of each media, right, it's based really on the practitioner, like myself, on the communication practitioner. If I'm the head of prime minister department, it's up to me to decide which media that I'm going to use. The same goes like if he's or she, the head of corporate com for another ministry, he or she will decide on which platform best to use, can relatable to the media. So another experience that I had when was the head of corporate com for TDA, Technology Depository Agency, is a GLC under the Ministry of Finance. I have this difficulty to identify trade magazines, right? Because it's not really in our nature to get into these trade magazines to understand which trade magazines are available in our market and all that. So maybe if there's some sort of like a database, like what your platform can provide to us, right, to understand which trade media, who are the journalists in those certain beats that we can approach to pitch our projects or ideas, that might be a better place. So it's important for me to use the right media archetypes to give a certain message, to amplify the message. If not, it will get lost in translation. That's number one. Number two, the impact may not be maximized. We can have some sort like a Malaysia Kini, the highest, almost all people know about Malaysia Kini, the highest readers and all that. But if the messages does not resonate with Malaysia Kini's idea and the archetypes, so the message won't get through also. So that's the importance of media archetypes, in my opinion. Okay, back to you, Calvin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Razis. Yeah, I know you were looking for the media archetypes for trade magazines and all this one. We can take it offline after this call. All right, so now over to Mr. Praneeth. From formulating your press releases and building up your campaign activities, as a technology leader, what are the key measurement metrics that we can use to evaluate the effectiveness of your communication strategies? And can you help run us through all these? Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Kelvin, for the opportunity to be here. Look, when we think of campaigns and when we think of metrics and how we measure the success of the team and success of everything that we do, I think two key pillars that we look at. One is obviously quality, but at the same time, then we look at quantity, right? It's whether we like it or not, as communications professionals, we have to find the right balance between quality and quantity. You cannot say, I'll just deliver you 5 pieces of coverage every month, and that's my job. And you have to measure both. So the way we look at measuring the two, the quality side of the house is collectively at the global leadership team level. We sit down and we look at which are the top 75 media outlets across the world where we need to have a share of voice. And within those 75 outlets, the top 75 across the world, and they are evenly spread. I work for an American company, but not all those outlets are American outlets, right? So we have outlets from all of Asia Pac, we have outlets from Europe, Middle East, Africa, we have outlets from the US. So in that list of 75, our focus is on delivering feature stories on Cisco. So it's not about press release distribution. It is not about that they carry a press release announcement, that they attend a product announcement. It's all about big, impactful features. And we look at setting really ambitious targets internally as to what we need to deliver on that. So that's number one on quality. And the way we control the quality, Kelvin, is we have a central communications intelligence team that sits in the US. My team and I can only submit the stories which we think are feature stories. Ultimately, they put it through a very rigorous formula, and there are measurable KPIs, the length of the story, the outlet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I won't bore you with the details, but that team approves or rejects whether your story was a feature or not. And they do it for the entire global team. So it's a whole comms intelligence team that sits there. So that's the quality piece. Then in terms of the quantity, No, second thing in terms of the quality that we do is we also understand that at the global level, you have 75 outlets and it has to be evenly spread. But at the regional level, there are also outlets that are very important that probably haven't made the global list. So I'll give an example from Singapore, for example. The Edge is not a part of the global 75 outlets, right? Because certain metrics. But the Edge is an incredibly important outlet if you are a comms practitioner in Singapore. So what we have done is we've taken the same formula and we've created an Asia top 50 outlets, which we call signature stories. Again, exactly the same formula that the global team uses. They approve or kind of reject that this was a signature story. So that's the quality piece, both at a regional, at a global level. And we are expected to contribute to both. Then on the quality side of the house, across all our markets, we look at the top 25 media outlets in that market. And then we use the tools to kind of measure all the stories that get written, that we get mentioned in about Cisco. And then we measure that alongside our competitors in different lines of businesses. And we measure our share of voice. And the teams have very clear targets where they need to be number one, hopefully in every single aspect, but where they need to be amongst the top three. So that's how we kind of measure. And final thing, then there are layers of measurement below that we look at, is in terms of message resonance. Out of the global top 75, how many were on business line A versus business line B? There are targets on that. And then we look at how many customers could we profile, how many employees beyond just the leadership team could we profile in terms of a culture and everything else. So it just keeps going a layer after layer. But in a nutshell, quality and quantity is kind of what we look at.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Puneet. I think it's so interesting to understand. And I'm sure you guys must have so many different metrics that you use, techniques and proprietary algorithms to help you measure and quantify all these different metrics. Having said that, can you share a little bit? Are there any pitfalls or blind spots that we need to be aware of?
I think it would depend from company to company. It would depend from communications professionals to communications professionals on how they view. I would say when I kind of look at metrics and when I look at measurement, there are 2 or 3 key things we need to kind of be aware of, right? One is constantly looking at whether the outlets that you are measuring yourself in terms of whether it's features, whether it's just overall coverage and share of voice, are they, one, the right relevance? Do they continue to remain relevant to you, right? Just because they have a big global name, they may not be relevant to you. So you have to kind of make some very judicious decisions on that. I think number 2, as a communications professional, I think you have to be absolutely in sync with what's happening at your own company, right? So I'll give Cisco and why do I say that? Is because it sounds like, yeah, but that should be right. But not many people kind of think, when you think of Cisco, we are seeing a huge transformation happening at our end in the way we do business, right? We are known as a networking company. Our DNA still remains networking, our roots still remain networking. But people don't know we are also amongst the largest software vendors in the world. I think we are the 6th or the 7th largest software company in the world. We are also one of the largest cybersecurity companies in the world. We are also one of the largest providers of collaboration platforms in the world. But all people talk about is network. So as a communicator, you have to think about when we are trying to sell solutions on hybrid work, when we are trying to sell solutions on how to reimagine your office space in today's environment where people don't come into the work 5 days a week. No one, I think, on this call wants to go into office 5 days a week. No one wants to go to the office to sit and write emails. We can all do it in our own home. We've seen that over the last 2.5 years. The office space has changed, and Cisco is trying to play a big role in helping companies redesign, reimagine office spaces. Now, what is happening is people who make the buying decisions on what are they going to buy. Are they going to buy WebEx? Are they going to buy Microsoft Teams? Or are they going to buy Zoom, which we are using today? That buying center is very different from the traditional buying center that would buy a networking product. There's HR involved. There are facilities people involved. Yes, there are some IT people involved, but there are a lot more people involved. Now, the traditional outlets you would focus on as a B2B networking company are not the media outlets that a HR professional is reading. They are not the media outlets that a workspace facilities manager is reading. They are reading business press. They are not reading the tech press. So you have to continuously evolve and think, what percentage of my features do I actually want to see in the business press? How much of my coverage should be there in the business press compared to tech press, which was dominated by us for a long time? So that transition, I think not being able to keep up pace with how your business is changing and where you sell and who those people are reading is changing, I think it's a very big pitfall if you're not being a partner to your business on that front. I think those things are the ones that people have to kind of keep thinking. And then just the environment, just being aware of where your competition is going. I mean, in one of my previous roles, one of our clients had a really incredible insight. One of their competitors in a Southeast Asian market, I will not name the country and I'll not name the media outlet, they signed a multi-million-dollar sponsorship deal with a leading media outlet saying we'll place ads worth millions of dollars. One of the parts was that you are going to cover less on our competition in your news, right? And it started affecting their coverage. So they had to change their model. They had to start going after other outlets. So being aware of what's happening in the market is also very important.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Puneet. I think, yeah, it's so in tune, being very aware and in tune with the market situation and environment, I think definitely is key. And I think you also raised a very good point on how the buyer decision and the traditional buyers group has evolved, to a different set of buyers as well. So I think that's really very, very interesting. So thank you so much, Mr. Puneet. Now, perhaps going back to Mr. Aziz, just like touch a little bit on crisis communications. So what do you think, how can public agencies, leverage upon the differentiated media outlets and audiences in dealing specifically with crisis communications, especially in the political realm? So over to you, Mr. Aziz.
So when we speak about crisis communications, is something that we prefer to avoid or making mistakes and all that. But crisis happens and we cannot avoid it, right? So one thing about this crisis communications, if any of you watch the movie Our Brand is Crisis, that's an interesting movie, right? Where we can learn a lot from it, how we demonstrate the media and all that, how we use the media outlets to convey our messages and all that. So in this the public agencies, we always rely on our press releases. We try to give information, but that information that we relate to the media have to have gone through a lot of tedious bureaucracies to get approvals and all that, just to have our our stories being backed up by actual facts and all that, right? We must convey the utmost right facts about it, and we try to convey the message to the public through a channel, a one-way channel, actually, is through the media and all that. But beyond that, it's also some of us may have some sort of like a practice, maybe informal practice and all that. We also approach these journalists, medias, just to tell them this is our communication line, what you want to tell and all that, what's our focus, what's the idea that we are giving out, right? Just to have a better understanding of what they are going to write. Sometimes what we write in our press releases is not being conveyed directly by the media, because media, bad news is good news. They try to find some angles which can make their news travel faster, more wider audience and all that. But using these connections, we understand the beats the journalists are writing and all that. We can have this some personalized approach and communication just to understand, to give them the understanding that the context of the situation that happened. I think another part, when we talk about the press releases and the facts, there's another part of human engagement, the communications that we really need to cater for, right? We do not want the media to have some sort of like a misunderstanding of what our messages are, because in the end, we want our message to go through to the public, to the audiences, which is the public, the rakyat, and the people. This is some of the I can say one of the key communicators role in the government, whereby we want the public to have a good faith and also a good perception on the government and its initiative. Of course, whatever the government is doing is for the betterment of the people, but sometimes that thing can be brought into the political realm, right? So when it became too political, this we as the communicators in government, we have a certain role to understand. Oh, this is politics. We are not going to delve into that. This is the government things. These are the things that we are going to cater. But again, when we mix both up, we also serve our political masters, the ministers, the prime minister, and all that, right? But on the other hand, we also have our government administrators. So we need to really understand the sentiment, the political sentiment, to understand the writer, even the media, the journalists. We need to understand their writing style and all that for us to approach them, right? To advise them. These are the key messages that we're going to tell the people. Please do not get it wrong, right? We want this information to be conveyed, this communication line to be conveyed, not the other way around. So this to understand the journalists, to have these two-way communications, right? To constantly engage in debate, in understanding them, helps to craft our crisis communication plan better. And also in the government, we have our own CCP, crisis communication plan. There's certain steps that we need to take. There's certain people will come in as advisors. There's certain layers of what we call that authorization that we need to get before we can release that information. But again, one thing we need to understand what the people is talking about on the ground. That's where the social media tools, listening tools can help us to really understand what are the sentiment on the ground before we can just simply or bluntly answer the questions or answer the media, the people's perception and all that. So I think it's based on the experience that we have before this. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Razis. I think right now in Singapore, there is definitely a lot of crisis communications going on. And I think a lot of our PR practitioners and journalists are kind of like having a field day trying to manage this and putting out the stories. But that aside, I think perhaps this is a question that's directed to both our expert panelists today. It's, I think, in today's rapid fire of misinformation or information, and there are so many magazines, newspapers, and outlets out there that's trying to grab your attention. So how do you ensure that your stories remain authentic, relevant, and also respectful to all your different diverse audience?
Razis, you want to go first?
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
I can go first. No worries. I think it's pretty simple, actually, Kelvin. This is the easy bit, because when you think of what would resonate with the audience, right? The answers are actually pretty simple. One, it has to be relevant to them, right? A lot of the audience, and this is something we try and do a lot at Cisco, is we try, when we are looking at, let's say, big picture thought leadership, research-led, data-driven storytelling, we drill down to the individual market level. Because when you talk to a journalist and when you're trying to pitch a story to a reporter in India or in Thailand or in Indonesia or Vietnam, they couldn't care less of what's happening in another country. What they want is, how is this story relevant to the audience that I cater to, which is the citizens and residents of the market they are writing for. So they want data. Then they do want a comparative analysis on how they are doing compared to the region and compared to the world. Right. So that I would say is number one. Number two, I think in terms of authenticity, you have to try and be creative in how you can tell the same story slightly differently. Because objectively, when you think of B2B communications, right, every technology company in the world almost has the same things to say. You will be hard pressed to find a technology company that doesn't say digital transformation is the key to economic growth. There is not a single technology company that will not tell you cybersecurity is the foundation of all digitization. And if you get cybersecurity wrong, your digital, agenda is gone, right? You're asking for trouble. There's not a company that will not tell you skills shortage is there, and that needs to be addressed by public-private partnership. So on and so forth. You can keep repeating message after message. It's the same from everybody. The beauty is in how do you bring this message to life in each market? And you do that through in-market data and in-market relevance. If you don't have that, then you're going to struggle.
Thanks so much. Perhaps over to you, Mr. Razis. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because we were talking about this misinformation, fake news, and all that is really not only one country's or one nation's problem. I think it's all over the world, right? We're having this certain mistrust or deficit. I would call it a trust deficit between the people and also the current government, whatever the authoritative government is. There is a trust deficit. Because why? Because all over us, there's too much information that is available for us to search. Right. I'm going to take a classic example of anti-vaccine movement and all that. Right. From what I understand, from what I learned, from my experience and all that, this have to do with our own psychological behavior as a human being. Sometimes we go on the net and we go search for something. We already have this what I call truth biasness, right? Which means, right, we are searching for information to confirm our belief. Right, this is what happened when we search for information that to confirm our belief. We're going to find the information in the net. Then there's a lot of information in the net that we are going to find information if we look for it. Am I right? So that's one of the challenges that we have. How are we going to get our messages or our stories or our information to the people and to perceive it as to be truth, the real truth and all that? So first of all, we as the government, we need to educate the people. Really, we have to educate the people to understand these are the sources of real information. These are the sources of reliable information. These are the sources of the official information. Please get your information from these sources, right? If they are not coming from this source, there might be some opinions, bias, and all that. We can have some sort of, I'm not going to call it lies, but it's maybe half truth, right? We are talking about half truth. We are telling one information, but are keeping one information from the other party and all that. So this education, to public education, needs to go along, right? And it needs to be supported by industries. The media need to support our agenda, right? They also need to have their information from reliable sources and all that. And I believe some of the tools that are available now can identify which are the credible sources and which sources are not that reliable based on certain algorithms and all that, right? That can help our communicators, the PR people, to understand which media to use as a credible source of information and to relay the information. Because in business, when we are talking about if we giving wrong information or we unable to counter perception, all that, it will affect your bottom line. But when we're talking about the government, the agencies, yeah, if you are unable to counter misinformation, if you are unable to counter negative perception, we're going to have a change of government, right? That's the impact that the communicators in the government need to understand, that they are not only trying to convey information or messages, but they are also trying to maintain the stability of a nation. That's the importance of communicators in the government agencies and all that. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Aziz. It's so insightful to hear from both sides. Different sides of the industry, right? We have Mr. Aziz from the public sector and also from the commercial space. We have Mr. Puneet. Some thoughts and ideas, some polarizing, and some are pretty similar. So I think thank you once again, for the very, very insightful panel discussions that we just had. So now let's move on to the next segment of our webinar. Let's open the floor to our live Q&A session. So for those of you who just joined, or for those of you who has some burning questions, please enter your questions in the chat box below, and we will try our best to answer them. So to kick it off, I think we have one question right now from our anonymous attendee. Given that everyone today, this is a very hot topic about generative AI, ChatGPT, Worm GPT for that matter. Given that everyone is talking about generative AI today, how do you think this tool will disrupt the way we tell stories and also captivate the audiences? And are there any changes to the measurements of storytelling we should adapt to accordingly? So perhaps Mr. Puneet, you would like to take this one?
I can. Did someone ask about generative AI? I don't think there's a conversation that happens, Kelvin, where generative AI doesn't come into it. I'll give you an anecdote. We had one of our senior leaders in town last 2 days, and we did 2 media interactions. And I think if my guesstimate is right, they were like 40-minute interviews each, one-on-one. Give or take, there were about 15 questions asked in that hour or 20 minutes. I think about 8 were on generative AI. And it's just the number one thing on everyone's mind. Look, impact on storytelling. I think there are going to be some few things that are going to start emerging in the next near to mid-term future with generative AI. It's a fantastic technology. I think it's one of those things that are going to have a huge impact on businesses across the world, and including on our profession, right? But I think there are 2 or 3 things that we need to think through as these happen. Number one, companies, and I'm talking through an in-house comms professional's vantage point. So please take it from that angle. I think number one, companies are going to start to realize as the hype, and I'm not saying the hype is the wrong hype, as the hype starts to kind of mellow down a little bit, and people take a step back and say, okay, how do I use this? Companies are going to start to have to answer questions like, this is an open AI engine, and I'm not saying ChatGPT, any of those engines. I'm not calling out one over the other. When I enter data into it, I have to enter a prompt for it to do something, right? Some prompts are simple. Tell me more about Kelvin Lim from Accenture. It'll probably scar your LinkedIn and your Facebook and give me some information, which is fantastic. But if I wanted to do my job and say, can you write me a press release on XYZ? Here is what I want to announce. I am about to put proprietary information that is not public knowledge and domain into an engine. And I think companies are already starting to ask questions, okay, what happens to the data? Where does it go? Who owns the data? How do I verify the authenticity of the information that it throws out back at me? And what does the engine do with the data that I have fed in? Because the data is being used to train the engine. So companies are going to start taking some steps back and probably ask their people to not share things that are proprietary and not share data. So that will limit what you can do with it, right? I think that's one thing that's going to happen. Second, I do think the advantage that will come, it will, at least from the initial things that I have played with on these engines, it will level the playing field on idea generation. Because I had a former colleague of mine who now works at one of our biggest competitors. We continue to remain friends. And he's the one who actually told me about ChatGPT the day it had launched. He said, have you tried it? I said, no, I have not. He said, you just got to have to do this. He put in a request to ChatGPT saying, give me ideas on stories I should tell about cybersecurity. And he sent me a screenshot of what ChatGPT had generated. And I looked at it and I said, God, these are really good ideas. I didn't think about them. Why didn't I think about them? Right. And he's working on 2 of them. Right. So I think the idea generation field will get level. The big impact, I think, that's going to happen is between client and PR agency side relationship. I don't think it's happening right now, but it's going to start to happen. So what has happened with machine learning tools in the legal side of the business is going to move to the comms side. So I'm not sure how many of our listeners keep up to date with legal. I do, because I used to run the professional services practice at the PR agency I was at. So I had a lot of legal clients, law firms. This is, I'm talking, Calvin, 5-6 years ago. Law firms were telling us that some of their biggest clients who have law firms on retainers, a lot of companies have law firms on retainers, just like we have PR agencies on retainers. They had started to go to these law firms and said, I don't want to see a bill from you which says a junior associate, which is like a first-year graduate from law school, has taken 4 hours to draft this NDA, and here is a bill for $1,000. Because an NDA can be drafted in 20 minutes by this engine. I think what we are going to see in the industry is, I'm not doing it to my agencies yet, but at some point, you're going to start to see clients tell the agencies, having a timesheet submitted, which says 8 hours on a press release is no longer acceptable. I'm not paying you 8 hours to do a press release. But the tension will come where you will say, you can't input my data into a chat engine, but I also want you to do it less. I think there's got to be a middle point somewhere, which companies will have to kind of debate and question. But it's exciting. But I think there's a lot more to be peeled in terms of layers before we can start to say it will take away our jobs. That I don't think it's going to happen.
Great. Thanks so much, Mr. Puneet. It's like the 1,235 generative AI question we had there. So we picked that one. And I believe Mr. Razis also has
1,234 can be answered by ChatGPT faster than I did. So.
All right. Over to you, Mr. Razis. I believe you have some thoughts about generative AI as well.
The thing that I learned, right, with this Gen AI age, this kind of generative AI coming into age, is how do we can use, or we can leverage this generative AI to have our storyline in one manner. Because in the government, yes, in the prime minister's department, we are giving the perception or bringing the message from the prime minister to the people. And sometimes these messages need to come across certain ministries and all that, which unfortunately we do not have jurisdiction to that ministry and all that, right? So sometimes the messages being told by a certain ministry might not have the same storyline that we intended to. So how do we leverage this? It's important to understand the prompts and all that. We need to input our previous line of communication, and this Gen AI can have those thousands of press releases that we are releasing each year, right? To have those in some coherent and also in some one line of communications that can be appreciated by most people. Sometimes we are having this problem of having conflicting messages. For example, currently we have these 2 key terms to portray our government, the term Madani and also the term Rahmah. Both of these messages can be confused upon each other because in messaging it's the simplest one we get across, right? So when we have these big jargons and all, it's hard to get across. So how do we use this generative AI to mix those together to have a very compelling storyline? So like what Mr. Puneet said just now, it's not only because we want to make our life easier by inputting, it's just lazy work. But the Gen AI can help us to streamline this information for us. And in the end, it's up to us to input the correct and accurate facts into the prompt to have the accurate information. If we put in wrong information or wrong even emotion. You can almost input emotions, right? When you chat GPT, we can put inside, can you answer this in melancholy way and all that. It will give you answers according to that prompt that we input. So it's important for those communicators to understand the subject matter first before they input the prompts and all that. But in the end, it can help us to give one, it can generate our narrative in a compelling storyline, so the message can get through to people easier. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Razis. I think definitely, I think like what you mentioned and Mr. Puneet mentioned as well, I think the prompts are really, really key and critical here because you put them in the right context. If you kind of like rubbish in, rubbish out. I think that's number one. And I think the thought about the level playing field as well with generative AI into the picture, right? I think that's such a scary thought because I think like eventually there will come a day, as in right now, the data sets, the large language models are coming from inputs from people like you and I, right, from the public. But eventually the systems might be taking answers from generated AI content as well, right? So it's like one huge language model that's it's going to level the entire playing field, and you know it's scary to think how that will actually pan out. So let's stay tuned and see what happens, you know, eventually. So I think we have a question as well for Faris. Are there any archetypes that have fallen out of favor in modern media, and what might be the reasons for their decline? Over to you, Faris.
Great, thanks, Colvin, and thanks for the person who asked the question. So, in a sense that we have to look into media archetypes as a personality-based, is a MBTI sort of thing for media outlets, in a sense. So, and every media outlet can have multiple archetypes. So there might be a dominant archetype, for example, the one that I mentioned earlier, where CNA dominantly is identified as a sage-like archetype. And they do have a secondary archetype, which is everyman archetype, or even content producers archetype. So in a sense that then I would not say that there's any archetype that have fallen out of favor, but more importantly, it's how audiences view certain archetypes and how well do they resonate with these archetypes. We have to understand that each media outlet have to present its own archetype because they have to. It's a differential factor between the media outlet and others. So let's say, for example, in Singapore, we have CNA, we have Today Online, we have Straits Times. All three might look the same. All three might look very, very similar. But what is the differential factor that a company or a brand would like to pitch to CNA, Straits Times, or Today, and not just pitch, but successfully push their narrative to? That's based on their archetypes. And in a sense that archetypes have more negative, quote unquote, traits. For example, Jester might seem to be, how should I put this? Might seem to be dangerous, perhaps, for certain brands to engage with. But if you look at the flip side, audiences love these kind of archetypes. Audiences love this kind of narrative. They love this kind of something to push certain buttons, you know, that mainstream media might not be able to do so. So I will say that it's not really a downfall or a shortfall or falling out of favor, but rather it increases or it widens the variety and diversity of the media itself. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Faris. I think that's definitely food for thought. I think for our PR practitioners out there to actually think about. And it's really, you know, from a media outlet standpoint, they can just, you know, stay stagnant and don't do the work as well, right? If they have a perceived archetypes that they want the audience to perceive them as, I think they got some work, you know, and them to do as well. So great, you know, I think we got a lot of questions to actually go through. I don't think we have the time to cover each and every one of them, but not to worry. We'll actually have a log of all the questions, and then we will also be providing, you know, the recorded session and also the product deck to all our attendees as well, together with the answers. So great and interesting questions from the floor. And today, I think we really, really hope that everyone has learned something along the way to contemplate within your line of work. So perhaps in closing, right, just for Mr. Puneet and also Mr. Raziz, what is one key takeaway, that you would like to share with our audience today from your life and journey as a communications practitioner? Perhaps Mr. Puneet, you would like to start first?
I can, Kelvin. I'll keep it very simple. I think there's never been a better time to be in the communications industry. Like, I genuinely, firmly believe it. Every single aspect of business, every single aspect of life, communications are now, professionals now have a seat on the table. There's not a decision that gets made where I'm not a part of the meeting. It's just never been better.
Great, thanks, Mr. Puneet. Mr. Raziz, your thoughts?
Yeah, just one single thing that I learned from all this journey from the government to the private sectors and come back to the government and going back to the private sectors is one thing, that all communicators are storytellers, right? We are all storytellers. We have stories to tell regarding our companies, our businesses, or even our lives. Some of that can be taken upon from experiences that we're having with the companies and all that. But we must remember that we are telling the story not for our own benefit, but for the others, for our audience to appreciate. So learning from your audience is one of the best way to get your messages being appreciated and also to be understood by most people. Yeah, that's the thing.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Raziz and Mr. Puneet as well. So I think in closing, right, media archetypes refer to the recurring patterns or stereotypes in media content, such as characters, storylines, or themes that are easily recognizable. So these archetypes serve as familiar storytelling personas and can influence perceptions and sentiments. So right now, you guys know there is another tool within your arsenal that you can actually leverage upon to help deliver compelling narratives, build brand awareness, and also shape public opinions. So last but not least, do stay tuned and keep in touch for our next exciting phase of evolution here in Isentia. In the coming months, we have a new and also very, very exciting product to share with you, folks in the PR and communication space. We will continue to engage with you real soon. And also do keep a lookout for our recorded session and today's product deck that was presented by Faris as well. So there should be a poll that just popped up. And if you could just help us rate the quality and the effectiveness of this particular webinar, will be most appreciative. And signing off, this is Kelvin again from Isentia. And in the meantime, thank you very much again to everyone of you guys on the call, to the esteemed panelists. Keep creating authentic, powerful, and relevant stories, everyone. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day ahead. Goodbye, everyone.